I'm Jackson Bass with Alabama Wrestling Forums here with Coach Hartzog of Alexandria High School. How you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing good. You?
Doing well, doing well. Let me start out by asking you, how did you get into wrestling?
How did I begin wrestling or coaching?
Begin.
I actually tried out for the basketball team, didn't make it, and some older guys said, "Hey, you need to come wrestle." And so I thought, sure, I'll try it. Fell in love with it.
Awesome, awesome. So you graduated from Weaver High School, and starting in '93 through 2004, you had the legendary Coach Gene Taylor over at Weaver, who had 9 titles in 11 years, which is almost unheard of. What was it like in that room? It's such a powerhouse team in the early to late '90s. What was going on in that room that made it so good?
Coach Taylor was pretty good about bringing in people. He had never wrestled, but he had a lot of connections, especially with Fort McClellan. So he brought in guys that wrestled all over the country. It would help us out, teach us some new things, and he bought into the basics. We drilled them and drilled them and drilled them, and we drilled till we were sick of drilling. And we really had some older kids that had really good work ethic, which is one thing I'm really trying to get our kids to buy into. And I think that was the only thing I've noticed between the few teams that I've seen is our work ethic seemed to be on point. Like we weren't afraid to outwork everybody else.
And how did your high school career go?
Well, I'm not sure it could have went a little better, but I think I've reached my potential. I don't think I'm not a super athletic person, but I bought into that. I'm going to try and outwork everybody. And so I had a little bit of individual success and which now I realize being a coach team wise, I was part of 2 championship teams, which still blows my mind now how fortunate I was to be on teams like that.
For sure. So what brought you into coaching after college?
Well, I'm a PE teacher, so I guess it was inevitable that to land a job, you have to coach. I had never really, honestly, this is going to sound horrible, but I didn't set out to coach. Ended up, the only way I could find a job is a buddy of mine who went to Oxford, Chris Lakey, had said, "Hey, there's an opening up here if you're willing to coach." And so I went up to Hayden High School and there it began, and I fell in love with it. And so at Alexandria, when the opportunity presented itself, the counselor actually asked me, said, "Hey, would you be interested in starting a youth wrestling program here?" I said, "Yeah." And then it just took off from there where I looking back now, I'm glad Alexandria didn't have a team when I was in school at Weaver, because the community out here is super athletic and very competitive, and they support most everything that these kids get involved
in. So, Alexandria is always a top, I would say when I was in high school, it was a top 5, top 10 program every single year. And, what are some of your key success in keeping the tradition and your consistency?
I really think just been blessed with good kids. We started, I think if anybody was to start a program, the best way to do it is how we did it. And it wasn't intentional. It was, hey, let's start a after school program, youth wrestling. But if you have youth wrestling and you have those kids, because the ones that have been so successful, like Christian Knopp and Jake New, they had all, and Fletcher Swindle, they all started in the youth. So moving up, that just kind of laid a little bit of a foundation for them to be successful. And I think just been blessed with kids that were as hardworking, if not harder, than probably the Weaver teams that I was a part of.
So you mentioned the Christian Knopp, Jaden New, Fletcher, specifically Christian Knopp. Um, what do you? He's a Division One athlete now at North Carolina State. What are some major things that you saw in him that would align with the Division One wrestler?
He absolutely lived and breathed for wrestling. He was the first kid in the room and the last one to leave, and he was a leader by his actions. No one in that room outworked that kid. And I think that's what, when I knew, hey, he has a chance to be super successful at the next level because he is going to give you everything he has. And he is perhaps one of the best athletes to come out of school, in my personal opinion. Anything and I tried to convince him for years, hey, why don't you try something else? I want to see what else you can do. Could never talk him into football, but he did cross country, was very successful, qualified for state, did track, did real well there, qualified for state. He just, anything he put his mind to, he was able to compete. He's just a hard worker and super athletic.
Now, you guys, I mentioned you guys are a powerhouse, and you guys were in 1 through 5A for so long. What was some of the biggest changes you guys had coming into this year, changing from, being, one of the bigger schools in 1 through 5A to now being, the smaller schools in 5, 6A?
Yeah, going in, it really was a mentality thing. Getting the kids to really buy into the amount of work that it was going to take, and being in a year that, heck, I'm just happy we had a year. I mean, I didn't know, as many other coaches, we had no clue if we were going to make it. Um, we ended up having to cancel a match beginning of the year. Then our county shut down while other schools were getting wrestled. I mean, we faced a lot of obstacles, but the biggest thing to me is I realized y'all ain't. I mean, you going from being the big dog to we're like in the bottom five of 5A schools competing 6A. So I think it was really just, hey, we're not going to dominate. You're not going to be able to walk through certain teams. It was every match we had, every duel we had was going to be super competitive. So that was kind of something we had to get them to face a little bit of reality. We had been in that smaller division, which was great, but at the same time, I think this year it was good to push some of our better kids, let them have a taste of wrestling at higher competition.
So you brought up COVID. Well, how did COVID affect your team this year?
Uh, honestly, I guess we were really lucky. Now we had several kids get it, but as far as any serious side effects, it was slim to none. Before the season actually started, we actually do tryouts to kind of see if the kids have the heart to make it through the season. And I was actually quarantined when we had weight certification and tryouts. My wife had got it, and luckily I didn't really knock her down for too long. And then I got it, and it really, I guess we're blessed in the fact that it really didn't affect us too much, other than shutting down a good portion of our season. We kind of rearranged practices because our nurse basically said, "Hey, you break that 6:15 rule, if somebody's positive, they go home." And I said, "So you're telling me if I don't break that rule, then they don't have to go home?" So we tried to look for what was the best way to keep the most kids in the room competing. So we ended up rotating. We did, depending on the day, anywhere from 10, 13 minutes, we'd rotate partners so that if somebody did get sick, they weren't having to go home. But I mean, there was 50,000 million obstacles, I think, with COVID that everybody had to face, and I'm just happy we made it through the season.
For sure, for sure. And I've got a segment on my Instagram where I have coaches weigh in on hot topics going on right now. And I've got 3 questions for you. Let me start out with one. And I've heard some really interesting stuff from everyone on this one. Is should wrestling in Alabama be one division or multiple divisions? And if multiple divisions, how should it be split up?
Well, I can see the argument for both sides. If you do one division, you're going to have well, you have a true state champion. But a lot of states don't do that, and I don't think it hurts anybody to have a couple more. I mean, my thing is we don't do it in any other sport. You don't do it in golf. You don't do it in tennis. I mean, each of those could be where they have one division. But I think my thought is you want to give the most opportunity for kids to be successful, and one division is not going to do that. Um, I don't think it's the end all be all to make things work for wrestling in Alabama. Number one, I think no matter what state you're from, I think you have to go compete nationally in order to be recognized by college, no matter what state you're in. So I don't think you can use it as well to be recruitment wise. I think it's just a matter of opinion. But I think to give the most kids a chance at being successful is the best way to grow the sport, which is why I also believe that we should add another division. Right now, it was 1A through 5A, and when they moved us to 6A, I said, "Hey, that's great. I'm not asking to go back with 4A, but I think to continue growing, I think eventually we need to split 5 and 6A. So we have 1 to 4, a 5, a 6, and a 7. I think then you have 4 state champions, which some people think that possibly that dilutes the value of a state champion. But to me, it's just another opportunity for a kid to be involved and be successful and hopefully eventually give back to the sport.
For sure. Now, my next question is: should club wrestling be a year-round thing, even throughout the season?
I don't see anything wrong with it, as long as it doesn't interfere with the actual high school season. Because you wouldn't want a kid to have to choose. It's just like now. I hate that sports overlap because when it comes down to it, there's occasionally a kid has to choose between finishing the season or starting a season. And to me, that's unfair to the kids. I think we need to allow them to be able to finish one. But that being said, as long as they're not being pulled away from competition, if a kid wants to go practice extra, I mean, how could you be against that? I don't understand thought process there.
So, where would you fight the argument that maybe someone like, and I've been using this, I have no idea if the school has it, but someone like Beauregard, maybe they don't have a club nearby. What would your response to that be?
Well, the closest club to us is Birmingham, which is an hour. I mean, if you're speeding and you don't run into traffic, so we're in that same boat. I mean, but just because somebody doesn't have the opportunity doesn't mean to me that you need to shut it down for everybody. I mean, if you have, which is another thing, another reason why I think we need to have as many people involved in wrestling as possible. So eventually, if you have 4 state champions every weight class every year, and then you move to 5 and 6, eventually you're gonna have some more kids that fell in love with wrestling that go on and compete no matter what division in college. And maybe they come back to Beauregard and they start a low or somewhere close to Beauregard and start some off-season stuff that they would be able to benefit from.
Awesome, awesome. And then my last question for this thing is girls wrestling is an up and coming sport in the state of Alabama now. What direction do you think they need to go in order to grow the sport and even grow wrestling as a whole in the state of Alabama?
Like, what do you mean by that?
Well,
Just to grow the sport?
I kind of messed up. Let's just do that 2 separate questions. How should they grow girls wrestling in the state of Alabama?
I think they're on the right track. I think it's just going to take a little while. And it's really going to boil down to being able to. Like right now, I would love to have a junior high coach that could take our junior high program to be able to compete and be successful. But I think the biggest thing is we're going to have to push statewide where we get more than one wrestling coach. Most smaller schools like us, even though we're 5A, we have one paid slot for a coach. So now, assuming, let's say, you had a girls' team, a junior high team, and a varsity team, it's kind of hard to get the wheels turning and get everybody involved. So I think it's going to have to be on an administrative side where we push for more funding for coaching wrestling.
And then, I kind of mushed these two questions together, but now I'm going to ask you this separately. Do you have any other insights in how we should grow the sport of wrestling in Alabama?
I think we got to keep pushing to have uh, more possibilities for champions and more team championships. If I'm a 5A administrator and you tell me, hey, why don't you start a wrestling program? And then I find out I have to compete against 6A, it might be very discouraging and hard for me to be, yeah, let's start a program. So I think we got to keep growing. And the fact, I think we've done great with 1A through 4A. Now, take out COVID, I think that we would have seen an influx of teams in 3A and 4A. I don't know about 2A, 1A, but 3 and 4, I think we could have added some programs there if you take COVID out. So maybe this next year we'll have a better indication of how that grows it. And then I think we've got to do the same with 5 and 6A. We split those. I think 6A teams as well would be more apt to start a program as well as 5A. But as far as I know there's proposal out right now to have 3 divisions, 3 equal divisions. The only problem with that is I think it's a step backwards because my understanding is it'd be 3 equal divisions. So the smaller division would have to include some 5A. So to me, that's moving a step back. We finally got 5A away from 4A. So 4A this year, there was a lot of teams and a lot of kids successful that wouldn't have been if 5A was down. But if we're going to push, even if it's 8 5A teams back down, I think that's going to hurt the growth. And then if they do this 3 divisions, then the top of 6A, let's say it's 10 to 12 teams, moves up to 7A. I think if you're a 6A school, depending on where you fall, you'd be real skeptical about starting a program knowing you have to compete against 7A. So I think I think it's really going to come down to us being really strong about pushing for another division. We've been 3 divisions since the 90s. I don't understand why we can't grow to 4 divisions. We're talking 2021. I mean, we're talking almost 30 years we've been 3 divisions. I think it's time for a step in the other direction.
Sure. Sorry. Well, thank you, Coach, for doing this so much. You have anything to say to my viewers before we go?
Just keep grinding. Never give up.
Awesome. Well, once again, Coach, thank you so much, and you have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
See you.